Nora Vallon was folding her husband's shirts when she found the letter. She did not scream. She did not cry. She set the shirt down on the edge of the bed, smoothed the collar flat with both hands, a slow, deliberate press, the way you might close the cover of a book you are not ready to put away. And then she read the letter again from the beginning. Because by morning, she would understand that the life she believed she had finally earned had never belonged to her at all. The shirts were warm from the dryer. That was the first thing she noticed when she opened the laundry basket. That particular smell of heated cotton and the faint cedar of Marcus's fabric softener, a brand she had teased him about for years because it was the expensive kind. The kind that came in a glass bottle from a boutique on Mercer Street, as if even his laundry needed to announce itself. She had been married to Marcus Vallon for 11 years. She knew the weight of his dress shirts, the way the sleeves had to be folded inward at the cuff rather than turned out, the order in which they needed to be stacked so nothing creased overnight. She had folded these shirts thousands of times, and until tonight, there had never been a single thing inside them that surprised her. The letter was tucked into the inner breast pocket of the gray wool blazer she had been about to hang. Not folded like something hidden, folded like something kept. There is a difference. She would think about that later, the word kept. What it means to hold something close without wanting anyone to know. The envelope was cream-colored, slightly thicker than ordinary paper, the kind used by law firms or by people who still believed that quality stationery said something about character. There was no stamp, no return address, just a name in the upper left corner, printed in dark ink. Hale and Moorhead Advisory Group. She did not know the name. And yet something in the font, in the precise spacing of the letters, felt faintly familiar in the way that certain sounds feel familiar before you can place them. A chord heard once in a waiting room, a phrase from a language you studied and then forgot. Inside, a single page, dated 3 weeks ago, addressed to Marcus Aurelius Vallon. She read it standing in the bedroom, bare feet on the oak floor, the warm shirt still draped over her left arm. She read it twice. Then she set it on the nightstand, walked to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and stood at the counter watching the street below through the dark window for a very long time without moving. The city she could see from the kitchen window was not the city she had grown up in. This was Halford, a mid-sized city in a country that had taken her 11 years to stop thinking of as temporary. She had arrived from Trevis, a smaller, older city on the other side of an ocean, at the age of 31, newly widowed, newly bankrupt, carrying nothing but a single suitcase, her mother's silver ring on her right hand, and a skill set so specific it had taken her 4 years to translate it into something this country would pay for. She was a textile archivist. She restored old fabric, tapestries, ceremonial garments, wedding dresses, military uniforms. The kind of work that required patience and precision and a willingness to sit for hours with a magnifying glass and a tool no wider than a toothpick, pulling single threads back into alignment. It was not glamorous work. It paid almost nothing at first, but it was hers. She met Marcus at a preservation gala in the city's arts district 7 years after arriving. He was handsome in the way that men who have never truly suffered tend to be handsome, smoothly, untroubled, with an easiness about the jaw that Nora had once found reassuring. He was an architect. He had a practice. He had this apartment. He had a warmth that felt real, or that she had believed felt real. And at 38, she had been tired enough from rebuilding herself from nothing that warmth had felt like enough. She had not been careless. She needed to be clear about that, standing at the kitchen counter in the dark. She had not been naive. She had done everything a careful person does when entering a second marriage late, when you have already learned the precise weight of grief. She had paid attention. She had asked the questions. She had watched for the things that mattered. and still she had missed something. The letter said so. She went back to the bedroom and picked it up again. The letter was from a legal advisory firm. It pertained to a trust. Specifically, it pertained to the Kessler-Vanden Trust, established 14 years ago, valued in the letter at just over $4 million, held in the names of 2 individuals, one of whom was Marcus Aurelius Vallon, and one of whom was listed only as the co-contributor. The co-contributor's name was Nora Elise Vanden. She set the letter down for the second time and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was very quiet. Marcus was traveling. He was always traveling. A condition of his work she had accepted years ago. And the apartment had the particular quality of silence that large, expensive spaces develop when they are occupied by only one person. Nora Elise Vanden. That was her maiden name, the name she had used before her first marriage, before the bankruptcy, before any of this. A name she had not used professionally in over a decade, and had not used legally since she filed her international relocation paperwork 12 years ago. A name she had told Marcus about once, early in their relationship, over dinner at a restaurant on the harbor, in the way that people who are falling in love disclose their entire histories in a single evening, because it feels like safety. She had told him her maiden name. She had told him about Travis. She had told him about the first husband, the textile company that had collapsed, the debt that had followed her across an ocean, the years of rebuilding. She had told him all of it, and he had listened with the particular quality of attention that she had taken then for love. Now she was looking at a document that used her maiden name to attach her identity, without her knowledge, to a financial instrument she had never signed, never agreed to, never heard of. She did not sleep that night. She sat on the living room couch with the letter on the coffee table and a lamp on low, and she thought through every conversation she could remember, scanning her own memory the way she scanned old fabric under magnification, looking for the thread that had been pulled through without her noticing. There had to be a moment. There always was. A moment when the technique became visible if you looked closely enough, when you could see exactly where someone had reached in and disturbed the original weave. She thought she had felt safe. That was the part that would take the longest to process. Not the betrayal itself, but the fact that safety had been the condition of her life for the past 4 years. She had rebuilt herself once before, from actual wreckage, from the rubble of a business and a marriage that had ended within the same brutal year. She had come through that. She had come to believe that surviving something that hard meant you had earned a kind of immunity, not from suffering in the abstract, but from the specific kind that comes from trusting the wrong person again. She had told herself she was strong enough now. She believed it. She had even been proud of it, quietly, in the way she did most things, without announcing it. She was 49 years old. She had rebuilt herself once. She did not know yet if she could do it again. But she picked up the letter, folded it back along its original crease, and slid it into the pocket of her cardigan. And she did not put it back. The next morning, she called in sick to the restoration studio for the first time in 3 years and went to see her accountant. His name was Pavel Duran. She had used him since her 2nd year in Halford, when she had finally started making enough money to need someone to manage it. He was 60, Slovak-born, perpetually caffeinated, and possessed of the particular professional caution of someone who has watched too many clients be destroyed by documents they did not read carefully enough. She trusted him completely, which is to say, she trusted him with her money, which, for Nora, had always been a more intimate kind of trust than most people understood. She showed him the letter without saying anything first. He read it twice, set it on his desk, and looked at her over his glasses. "How long has Marcus had access to your original legal name?" "Since before we married. I told him about my history early on. He knew everything." Did you sign anything in the first 2 years of the marriage with your maiden name? Any documents, any accounts, anything that might have established a legal trail? She thought. There had been documents when they married. The name change had been formalized in Halford's records, but she had retained Vanden as a middle name, a private choice, something to keep from Trevis. It was on her original immigration paperwork and her first Halford tax filings, which Marcus, who had helped her navigate the system in that first year, had seen. "He helped me with the immigration filings," she said. "He had access to copies of the original documents." Pavel was quiet for a moment. He turned back to the letter. "A trust valued at $4 million doesn't get established without documentation. Someone signed for the co-contributor. Either you signed something you didn't understand, or someone else used your information to sign on your behalf." Neither option felt like an accident. "Can you find out when the trust was formed?" "I can find out who filed it," he said. "Give me a few days." She left his office and walked along the river for a long time. The water was gray and flat, moving slowly south, the way it always moved in autumn. Halford was not a dramatic city. It did not have the kind of geography that insists on your attention. It was a city of horizontal lines, long avenues, flat parks, buildings that settled into their lots rather than reaching above them, and she had always found it calming, which was why she had stayed. She had needed a place that did not remind her of anything. Now she walked its streets and felt, for the first time in years, like a stranger. She thought about Trevis. She thought about her mother's silver ring, which she still wore, and about the textile company her first husband had run into the ground with a speed that still impressed her in retrospect, the way truly spectacular failures could be almost admirable for their efficiency. His name had been Rowan Dahl. He had been charming and impulsive, and she had loved him completely for almost 4 years before the company collapsed, and she understood that the debts had been building for years before she noticed. She had not been stupid then, either. She had simply trusted the wrong reading of the evidence. She had seen what she wanted to see. She did not want to be making the same diagnosis again at 49. But the letter existed. Pavel would find what he found, and Nora, who had spent 20 years reading the truth through what the surface concealed, was not going to wait. She began at home. She was systematic about it, not frantic, not emotional. She approached the apartment the way she approached a restoration project, with a methodology, a hypothesis, and patience. She was not looking for an affair. An affair would have been simpler. She was looking for something more specific. Evidence of who Marcus Vallon actually was. Under the warmth and the expensive fabric softener and the 11 years of careful presentation. She started with the home office. Marcus kept his office locked, a fact she had always accepted without question. He handled sensitive architectural contracts, he had said early on, and client confidentiality was part of the work. She had never found this suspicious because she herself had strong feelings about professional privacy. Now she looked at the locked door differently. She did not have a key. She did not force it. Instead, she went to the kitchen junk drawer and found what she knew was there. The extra key to the filing cabinet in the guest room, where Marcus kept what he called his personal archive. Old tax records, insurance documents, medical files. She had been in the filing cabinet twice in 11 years, both times with Marcus present, both times for a specific and ordinary reason. She opened it now alone for the first time. The first 3 drawers were exactly as expected. Tax filings going back 15 years, insurance policies, the deeds to 2 properties Marcus owned before the marriage, which she knew about, a folder of old architectural certificates. The 4th drawer was different. It contained a single manila envelope, thick, unlabeled. Inside were documents she had never seen. Bank statements for an account she did not recognize. A name on the account. M.A. Vallon, with an address in a city called Whitmore, in a country she had never visited. Correspondence between Marcus and a company called Vanden Legacy Holdings. Correspondence between Marcus and a law firm she did not recognize, and near the back, a photocopy of her original immigration documentation, her name, her maiden name, her date of birth, her signature from 12 years ago. She photographed everything with her phone. She put the envelope back exactly as she had found it. She locked the drawer. She went to the kitchen and washed her hands as if she had touched something unclean. That evening, Marcus called from his hotel. She answered with a voice she had been practicing all day without knowing it, steady, warm, unremarkable. He told her about the project, a cultural center commission in a northern city, a client he was very excited about, the usual details. She asked the usual questions. She said she missed him, which was the thing that surprised her most, how easily it came out, and how completely untrue it felt. When the call ended, she sat in the silence of the apartment and thought about the phrase, Vanden Legacy Holdings. Vanden was her name. Had been her name. Legacy implied something inherited, passed down, accumulated over time. Holdings implied assets. Plural. Multiple. She was not a financial expert, but she had spent 3 years once learning the language of debt from the inside, and she knew that when someone builds a structure around a name, there is always a purpose for that name. Names are not decorative in these documents. They are legal instruments. They establish presence. They create liability and ownership and claim. Her name had been used to establish something she had not built. The question was how long it had been happening. She called Pavel. "The trust was formed 9 years ago," he said, without preamble, when she reached him the following afternoon. 2 years into your marriage. She had been 40 years old. She had been in love, or something close enough to love that she could not have told the difference. She had been grateful in the way that people who have survived catastrophe are sometimes grateful for ordinary warmth, a gratitude that can look a lot like blindness if you don't examine it carefully. What does the trust contain? Real estate holdings primarily, properties in 3 countries, including your country of birth. The trust was registered using your maiden name as co-contributor, citing your prior business history in Trevis as the basis for international holding rights. Whoever set this up knew your history in Trevis in detail. She said nothing for a moment. Can you find out if any of the Trevis properties are ones my family held? A pause, then carefully. Why would they be? She thought about her mother's silver ring. She thought about Trevis, which she had left at 31, with a single suitcase and a debt that felt like a physical weight on her chest. She thought about the textile company and the bankruptcy, and the things that were lost in the filing. Not just money, but assets her mother had left her. 2 small properties in the old quarter of Trevis that she had assumed were gone in the proceedings, dissolved like everything else in the wreckage of Rowan Dahl's mismanagement. Because I lost properties in Trevis 11 years ago, she said, and I never fully understood where they went. 2 days later, Pavel called back, and when she answered, his voice had the quality of someone choosing every word with considerable care. 2 of the properties in the Kessler-Vanden Trust are listed under addresses in Trevis's old quarter, he said. I ran the property registry numbers against old filings. The original ownership history on both of them traces back 14 years. Her mother had died 14 years ago. She sat down on the kitchen floor, which she had never done before in her life, simply folded down to the tile, back against the cabinet, phone pressed to her ear, and said nothing for a long time. Nora, I'm here. I can't confirm this without a Trevis licensed attorney, but it appears as though the title transfers on those 2 properties were filed during the bankruptcy proceedings. during the period when your first husband's company was being dissolved. The transfers went to a holding entity. That entity has since been absorbed into the Kessler-Vanden Trust. Her mother's properties. Properties left to her. Properties that should have been hers through her mother's estate, not through Rowan's bankruptcy, because they had never belonged to Rowan. They had been in her name, her maiden name, inherited before the marriage. Someone had used the chaos of the bankruptcy to take them. She did not ask who. She already knew who. The question was how long Marcus had known. The more precise question, the one that kept her lying awake in the dark that night, was whether Marcus had known Rowan Dahl. She went back through her own memory with the same rigor she applied to everything, and she found, threaded through the past 11 years, like a hair caught in old weaving, something she had noticed and then discarded. Marcus had known, on their first date, that she was from Trevis. She had told him at the gala when he'd asked, but she had not said Trevis specifically. She had said she was from a city on the coast. He had said the name, Trevis, before she confirmed it. She remembered the small surprise of that, and then she remembered herself filing it away under charming, under attentive, under this is a man who listens. Now she filed it differently. She called a woman she had not spoken to in 6 years. Her name was Fia Sol, and she had been a property attorney in Trevis, one of the people who had helped Nora navigate the bankruptcy proceedings all those years ago. They had not kept in touch, not because of conflict, but because some relationships are shaped by a specific crisis and do not easily survive its absence. The phone rang 4 times before Fia picked up. Nora said her name. Fia said nothing for a moment, and then, "I wondered if you'd ever call." The phrasing stopped her. "You wondered specifically?" "There were things about the Dahl bankruptcy that I thought someone should look at more carefully. But you were gone, and I had no way to reach you. And honestly, I wasn't sure you'd want to know." A pause. "I did keep a file." "What kind of file?" "The kind I keep when something doesn't add up, and I can't let it go." Fia's file arrived as a scanned document 4 days later. Nora received it at Pavel's office, where she had taken to spending her afternoons in what had become an unofficial investigation room. Maps spread across a secondary desk, document timelines taped to the wall, a system that would have looked paranoid to anyone who didn't understand what was in it. The file was 40 pages. It contained the original bankruptcy filings, annotated by Fia with small handwritten notes in the margins, and several property transfer documents that had been processed through a third-party legal entity during the most chaotic period of the proceedings. The entity was called Dahl Kessel Holdings. Nora read it 3 times before the name fully registered. Kessel. Not Kessler, but close. The name in the trust she had found in Marcus's blazer was Kessler-Vanden. The name in the bankruptcy filing was Dahl Kessel. She wrote both names on the whiteboard Pavel had let her use and stared at them for a long time. Then she searched for Kessler, independent of both. The search returned a Halford business registration from 19 years ago, a small investment company. 1 director. The director's name was not Marcus. It was a name she did not recognize. Gregor Valen. She looked at the name. Then she went very still. Valen. Marcus's surname. But not Marcus. Gregor Valen. She typed the name again, this time adding Halford and architecture. A single result. A brief obituary from 12 years ago. Gregor Valen, businessman and occasional architectural patron, had died at 72 following a brief illness. He was survived by his son, Marcus Aurelius Valen. The trust was called Kessler-Vanden. The bankruptcy entity was Dahl Kessel. Both names contained traces of both names, Kessel from Gregor Valen's company, Vanden from Nora's maiden name. The trust had been built from the ruins of her first marriage, using the legal machinery of her bankruptcy, by a company that her current husband's father had founded. She sat back in Pavel's chair and looked at the ceiling. This was not an opportunistic crime. This was not something Marcus had built alone or recently. This was something that had been constructed before she arrived in Halford, something that had anticipated her, something that had been waiting. Pavel appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee, took one look at her face, and set both cups on the desk without speaking. "His father," she said. "I saw that." "How does a man build a financial structure around a woman he's never met?" Pavel sat down. He doesn't. Not unless someone told him about her. She thought about Rowan Dahl. She thought about the way the bankruptcy had moved, faster than it should have, in directions she hadn't understood at the time, with outcomes she had accepted because she had been 31 and exhausted and desperate to simply survive it. She thought about certain documents Rowan had pushed her to sign quickly. She thought about the legal entity she'd assumed was a routine part of the dissolution process. "Is there any way Rowan Dahl had a relationship with Gregor Vallon?" she asked. "Are you asking me to find that out?" "Yes." It took Pavel 2 days, and when he found it, he called her from his car in the parking garage below his office, which told her how serious it was before he said a word. Rowan Dahl and Gregor Vallon had served on the board of a cultural foundation together for 6 years. They had been connected to the same investment circles in Trevis and Halford, and in the year before Nora married Rowan, Gregor Vallon's Kessler Holdings had participated in an early financing round for Rowan's textile company. He had not been just a business acquaintance. He had been an early investor. She put the phone down on the passenger seat of her own car and stared through the windshield at the concrete wall of the parking structure and breathed very slowly for a long time. Gregor Vallon had invested in Rowan Dahl's company. Rowan's company had failed, taking with it, she now believed, assets that should have gone to her. Those assets had been quietly transferred to a Vallon-connected holding entity. Then, years later, she had met Marcus Vallon at a gala, and he had known she was from Trevis before she told him, and he had been charming and warm and patient, and she had believed that this time was different. She was not looking at a betrayal, she was looking at an inheritance. Not hers, his. The question, the one she could not answer from a document or a timeline, was whether Marcus knew. Was he a man who had deliberately sought her out, cultivated her trust, married her as part of a long financial strategy built by his father before him? Or was he a man who had simply benefited from a structure he had inherited without full understanding, who had known something was wrong and had chosen not to ask? The distinction mattered, not for legal purposes. She was beginning to understand the legal consequences were coming regardless of what Marcus intended. It mattered for something harder to name. The difference between a man who looked her in the eyes for 11 years, knowing exactly what he had taken, and the man who looked her in the eyes not knowing, because he had decided it was safer not to look. She was not sure which was worse. She told no one what she was planning. Not Pavel, she kept him focused on documentation. Not Fia, who had gone quiet after delivering her file. Not her sister in Trevis, whom she called once a week and whose voice she could not trust herself to hear without fracturing. She was building something. She had not named it revenge because revenge implied heat, and she felt cold. She had not named it justice because justice implied a system working on her behalf, and she had not decided yet how much of the system to trust. She was simply building. She requested a meeting with Hale and Moorhead, the law firm whose name had been on the original letter. She introduced herself as a legal researcher working on behalf of a client, which was technically accurate and gave her access to basic corporate information she would not otherwise have obtained. The junior attorney she met with was young, cautious, and clearly uncomfortable. And he told her nothing directly, But she watched what he didn't say, the specific questions he deflected, the drawer he touched when she said the name Vanden, the way he glanced at his phone twice when she mentioned Trevis. People communicate constantly without intending to. It was the same skill she used in her actual work, reading the structure beneath the surface. She left the office with 3 names she had not had before, which she cross-referenced against the documents Pavel had compiled. One of the names appeared in the Trevis bankruptcy records. One appeared in the registration documents for Kessler Holdings. The third was new, but connected to a notary firm that had processed several of the property transfers 14 years ago. She was building a map. Not of wrongdoing. She already knew the wrongdoing. She was building a map of exactly who had known what and when. Because she had learned the first time she was destroyed that the worst damage rarely comes from one person. It comes from the number of people who quietly allowed it. Marcus came home on a Thursday. She cooked dinner, which she almost never did on weekdays, and she set the table properly, which she also almost never did, and she poured 2 glasses of wine. He walked in, looking tired in the particular way of someone who has been performing charm at a distance for several days, and he kissed her on the cheek, and she noticed that she did not stiffen, which surprised her. She had expected her own body to betray her, but it did not. She had learned a long time ago to keep her face quiet. They ate. He told her about the commission. She asked careful questions, and she watched him the way she had trained herself to watch, looking for the seams. He ate with appetite. He laughed twice. He refilled her glass without being asked, which he always did. A small intimacy so habitual it had ceased to be visible. She said conversationally, testing, "I've been thinking about Trevis lately." He looked up. "Oh?" "My sister wants me to come visit. I haven't been back in years." "That would be good for you," he said. No flicker, no hesitation. "I was thinking about the old quarter, the properties my mother left. I know they were lost in the bankruptcy, but I sometimes wonder where they ended up." He refilled his own glass, set the bottle down, picked up his fork. "You told me they were dissolved in the proceedings, long gone." "You're right. I'm just being sentimental." She smiled. He smiled back. He had no idea, she thought, or he was very good. She still did not know which. But she added it to the map. The thing she had not expected was the lawyer. His name was Declan Moore. He appeared in her life not because she sought him out, but because he sought her out, which was itself significant. He reached her through Fia, who called her on a Monday morning to say that a colleague of hers, a business law specialist, had become aware of the Kessler-Vanden matter through channels she would not specify over the phone, and wanted to meet. She met him at a cafe near the river. He was in his early 60s, unhurried, wearing a coat that was good but not expensive, which she catalogued as intentional. He ordered tea and did not open a briefcase or produce documents. He looked at her the way people who know something serious look at you when they are deciding whether you are ready to hear it. She said, "Tell me what you know." He told her. The Kessler-Vanden Trust had been created as part of a larger estate structure following Gregor Wallen's death. Gregor had held assets accumulated over 20 years through various holdings, some of which, Declan was careful here, were of questionable provenance. Among them were the 2 Trevice properties, which had been acquired through the Dahl bankruptcy via a mechanism that Declan described as aggressive and that a court might describe differently. Gregor had structured these into the trust before his death, naming Marcus as primary beneficiary and using the name Nora Elise Vanden as co-contributor to establish the international holding validity. It was, Declan said, a strategy. Her name gave the trust a legal foothold in Trevis's property framework that Gregor needed for the structure to hold. "Without my knowledge," she said. Without your knowledge, without your consent, and almost certainly without your husband's full understanding of the mechanism, Declan said. Marcus inherited the trust. Whether he investigated its origins thoroughly is a different question. You're telling me he might not have known how it was built? I'm telling you the paperwork suggests his primary engagement has been in managing the trust as received, not in auditing its origins. Whether that's ignorance or strategic incuriosity, I can't answer that. Strategic incuriosity. The phrase settled in her chest like something cold. What can be done? She asked. That depends, he said, on what you want. She thought about what she wanted. It was not what she had wanted 11 years ago when she had wanted to survive, and it was not what she had wanted 7 years ago when she had wanted to believe in someone. She was 49 years old. She had rebuilt herself once from absolute wreckage. She was not in wreckage now. She was in something stranger. A structure built around her name, without her, in which she was simultaneously the foundation and the prisoner. I want my mother's properties back, she said. And I want the structure around my name to be seen. Declan nodded. The first is possible. The second will happen on its own. Marcus came home that Friday to find Nora sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of water and 2 people he did not know. Declan was there. Pavel was there. On the table, in a folder, was a copy of the letter from Hale and Moorhead, alongside a selection of documents she had spent 3 weeks assembling. She did not ambush him with emotion. She did not cry. She sat with her hands folded and let Declan do the initial speaking, because she had decided that she did not owe Marcus her voice in that moment. She owed it only to herself, and she would use it when she chose. Marcus's face moved through several expressions quickly: confusion, recognition, the specific compression around the jaw that she had always associated with him receiving difficult news in professional contexts. He looked at the documents. He looked at her. He said, "How long have you known?" She said, 3 weeks. He said, It wasn't something And then he stopped. She waited. My father set it up, he said finally. I inherited it. I knew the structure wasn't clean, and I should have told you. Should have told me what, specifically? A very long silence. Outside, the city moved and breathed in its ordinary horizontal way. Traffic, and somewhere a siren, the faint smell of rain coming through the window she had left open. That I knew the trust contained properties from your original estate, he said. I found out 3 years after we married. I had the trust audited, privately, and the attorney told me about the Trevis provenance. I told myself it was historical at that point, that there was nothing to be done, that bringing it up would only hurt you. His voice had dropped. I convinced myself I was protecting you. The word protecting. She thought about her mother, who had left those properties to her. She thought about the years her name had been used as a legal instrument without her knowledge. She thought about every time Marcus had watched her speak with nostalgia about Trevis, about her mother's house, about the things that were lost, and had said nothing. You were protecting the asset, she said. He did not disagree. Declan set out the legal framework. The properties could be challenged on the basis of the irregular provenance of the bankruptcy transfers. Nora had a strong claim as the original heir, separate from any claims related to the marriage or the trust structure. The trust itself, constructed using her identity without consent, had its own liabilities. None of it was simple. None of it was fast. Marcus did not fight it. That was the thing she had not predicted. She had prepared for a fight, had built her case for a fight, and instead, she got something that felt almost worse. A man who sat across from her and was simply tired, who said, I know, and I'm sorry, in the measured tones of someone who has been carrying a quiet guilt for 3 years, and is relieved, in some horrifying way, to put it down. She did not forgive him that evening. She did not tell him she hated him. She told him she needed him to leave the apartment. And he left. She sat in the kitchen alone until very late, the lamp on low, the city visible through the window, and she folded and unfolded the edge of her cardigan with both hands, the same slow, deliberate gesture she used to smooth fabric under examination, to return things to their proper alignment. The legal process moved slowly, as legal processes do. Declan filed in Trevis's registry court 6 weeks later. Hale and Moorhead, when confronted with the full documentation, moved quickly to distance the firm from the trust's founding mechanism, which was itself a form of confirmation. The trust was suspended pending review. The 2 properties in Trevis's old quarter were placed under protective order while the chain of title was examined. Pavel called her the morning after the suspension with a quality of quiet satisfaction in his voice that he did not try to conceal. "The Vanden Legacy Holdings subsidiary is also under review," he said. "When the trust fell, it seems several other structures started drawing attention." "What structures?" "Marcus's father had considerable reach," he said. "And when people with considerable reach build things in ways they shouldn't, there tends to be others who have been waiting for a reason to look more carefully." She sat with that for a moment. She thought about Gregor Valen, whom she had never met, who had invested in Rowan Dahl's company 25 years ago, who had watched the collapse from a distance and understood what was in it for him. She thought about the patience that required, the specific, cold vision of someone who looks at another person's catastrophe and sees an opportunity. And she thought about her own mother, a woman who had lived in the old quarter of Trevis her entire life, who had left those 2 properties to her only daughter because she believed that some things were meant to be passed down, that what a woman builds ought to reach the next generation intact. The properties were not going to be intact when she received them. They had been tenanted for years, managed by entities she did not choose. But they would exist. They would have her name on the title. That was what her mother had wanted. And it was what the men who had moved through her life like quiet architects had worked to prevent. She thought about Gregor Valen building a structure before she arrived. She thought about her mother building before she was gone. She thought about which inheritance was stronger. Marcus sent one letter, several months after he left. It was handwritten, 3 pages, on the cream-colored stationery from his desk. He said he had not known his father well. This was the phrase he used, not known well, as if Gregor were a continent rather than a person. He said he had understood, when he discovered the trust's origins, that it was wrong, and that his choice to say nothing had been a cowardice he did not know how to defend. He said he hoped she would receive what she was owed. He said he was sorry in the way people say sorry when they know the word is insufficient, and use it anyway because there is no other one. She read the letter twice, folded it along its original crease, and put it in the box she kept for things she had not yet decided what to do with. She was not ready to call it forgiveness. She was not ready to call it the opposite. What she knew was this: Marcus had inherited a crime, had recognized it, and had chosen silence. That was not the same as his father's cold construction. It was not innocent. But it was a different shape of wrong, and she was still learning the vocabulary for it. She went back to work. She had cases waiting: a 19th-century ceremonial tapestry from an estate auction, a collection of military jackets from a historical society in the north. She returned to the studio, to the magnifying glass, to the particular quality of attention required when something old and damaged needs to be read before it can be repaired. The tapestry was the hardest. It had been stored badly, and the damage was in the structural weft, the deepest layer, the part that wasn't visible in normal light. She had to work by feel as much as by sight, moving thread by thread through the interior architecture of the piece, understanding what had been there originally from what remained of it. It took her 6 weeks. When it was done, she hung it on the examination wall and looked at it for a long time. Her phone rang. It was Fia calling from Trevis. "The court ruled," Fia said. "Both properties. The title reverts to your estate." She stood looking at the tapestry. She could still see, if she knew where to look, the places where the damage had been. Not because the repair was poor, the repair was as good as she could make it, but because she knew the piece now, had spent weeks inside it, and some knowledge is not possible to unhave. "Nora," Fia said. "I heard you," she said. "Thank you." She ended the call and put her phone in her coat pocket and stood in the quiet studio with the tapestry in front of her and the autumn light coming sideways through the high windows and the smell of cedar and linen and the specific mineral quality of old fabric, which she had always found calming in the same way that the city's horizontal lines were calming, not dramatic, not spectacular, simply steady. She thought about what she had. She thought about what she had lost. She thought about the difference between the two, which she had been turning over for months, and which she was not finished turning over, and suspected she would not be for a long time. She thought about her mother's silver ring, which was on her right hand, which it always was, which no one had managed to take. The light came through the window and lay across the tapestry in a long, warm stripe. She put on her coat. She locked the studio behind her. She walked out into the city that was hers, not because anyone had given it to her, but because she had stayed in it long enough to learn all its lines. Revenge never gives back what was lost, but sometimes it reminds the wounded that they are still alive. She was alive. She walked. This has been a work of fiction, created for entertainment purposes. Names, characters, businesses, places, and incidents are products of imagination and do not represent any real persons or events.